Hello, Bruce Lee fans here and all around the world. I would like to thank the viewers of my first video, Bruce Lee's most interesting fight challenge, and express my appreciation for everyone's comments. This presentation is a follow-up and addendum of sorts to that first video. You see here the 1987 book by Enter the Dragon's director, Robert Clouse. This was written 15 years after the release of that movie and is a great reference for action, personalities, conflicts, and close-ups of the events that occurred during filming. I wish to give full credit to Robert Clouse as the author for the parts of the book that I'm using. I believe that these parts are relevant to showing Bruce Lee's true fighting abilities within the context of playing, sparring, and acting, all of which took place while Enter the Dragon progressed. Okay, here is a personally interesting excerpt from Robert Clouse's book that shows one of Bruce Lee's fights with an extra that challenged him. And it is interesting to me because 3 of these photos that you can see are used in my first video, which I didn't realize at the time, but discovered when I reread this book. So I was pretty pleased to see these photos and the accompanying text from the book that does establish this as a real fight challenge. And in addition, there are a number of key points Mr. Clouse makes as he speaks to this specific challenge. There were 400 or more extras used in Enter the Dragon. Many of these extras were in rival street gangs, and real battles often broke out. Bruce was challenged often and only accepted those that were too insulting or persistent. So typically, Bruce would start out by asking the challenger what they knew of Jeet Kune Do, and with the challenger's usual disdainful reply, followed by the challenger's first aggressive move, Bruce evaded that easily and would lash out to mark his opponent, which would mean drawing blood without serious injury if he could. He also talked about another challenge that Bruce faced, which was well known to many people, where he lashed out so quickly that nothing seemed to have happened to his challenger until the challenger opened his mouth and revealed it was full of blood. So Bruce's speed and reflexes were just spoken with awe by Mr. Clouse. He had difficulty filming his standoff with Bob Wall as his hand speed was such a blur. He also chimed in with the telling of Bruce's favorite palm trick game, where he would snatch a coin from someone's palm before they could close it. So there was real testimony for Bruce's speed and reflexes as something very special. In another section of Robert Clouse's book, he describes a well-known fight challenge that resulted in a serious injury. This was filmed in 16 millimeter by camera operator Henry Wong. It was when an extra asked Bruce to show him how to do a kick a certain way. And Bruce really loved to teach, but this extra started to demand that Bruce not leave afterwards so that he can show him what he had learned. When Bruce said he didn't want to fight, the extra called him a coward, as Mr. Wong relates, which is probably not the wisest strategy. The extra's mother actually then came over, and Bruce's entreaties to them to take him home just didn't work. So the fight ensued, and Bruce broke his rib, gave the mother $20,000 in Hong Kong money, which is about $4,000 US dollars at the time, and took him to the hospital. Mr. Wong lamented for much of his life that he had to take the film to Warner Brothers Lab, where it's never really been seen again. We really don't know what's happened to it, and maybe it's resting next to the Ark of the Covenant. The final excerpt I'll take from Robert Clouse's book shows Bruce in 3 sparring, teaching, and kind of playing sessions with his co-stars in Enter the Dragon: Jim Kelly, Robert Wall, and Bolo Young. Look closely at these pictures, and you can see some subtle but important differences from Bruce's movements in the most interesting fight challenge. It's the body language, the facial expressions, the playful stances in sparring and playing are different from a real fight challenge that is all about focus, simplicity, and technique. Sparring has much more play in it, even if there are some serious efforts to dominate. And I believe the differences are really telling from the true fight challenges and these kinds of situations that you could see here. So ends this short presentation. I really hope it was illuminating to everyone and enjoyable. I'd like to thank everyone out there that remains inspired by Bruce's, what I see as a meteoric blaze through the atmosphere of a much too short life. It made me think of Blade Runner, one of my favorite movies, and Dr. Eldon Terrell said a really fascinating quote: "The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long," and Bruce burned very bright indeed. Thank you again.